Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander's Core Studio. Welcome to the show. Though it feels like things have been going on already for quite a while now because of all of the pre-spoilers that kept coming out, Kamigawa Neon Dynasty official spoiler season is finally here. And it has started off with some really exciting and unique cards that I am really excited to cover. And of course, we have got to start off with what might be the weirdest card of all time. I mean, when I first saw this card in Reddit, I had to read it about 3 or 4 or 80 times to actually make sure I understood exactly what was going on with the reality chip. So with all that said, let's jump into it to see what exactly this card does. So the reality chip is a 0/4, get ready for it, legendary artifact creature equipment jellyfish for 1 and a blue. Yeah, I never thought I'd hear the phrase legendary artifact creature equipment jellyfish, or that they could even fit that much text on that line. Regardless, we'll wrap our heads around that here in a second. Anyways, it says you may look at the top card of your library anytime. On top of that, as long as the reality chip is attached to a creature, you may play lands and cast spells from the top of your library. Now, how exactly can we attach this to a creature? Well, we've got a brand new mechanic with Reconfigure. Reconfigure for 2 and a blue. It says pay 2 and a blue attached to target creature you control or unattached from a creature. Reconfigure only as a sorcery, while attached this isn't a creature. So essentially, this legendary artifact creature equipment jellyfish can stop being a creature and become just an equipment attached to something. Now, this equipment isn't going to buff the creature that it's attached to, but it does give you access to those cards on the top of your library. Even without this card being attached to any creature, you can still look at the top card of your library at any time, but once you attach it to a creature, you can play lands and cast spells from the top of your library. Again, I wasn't kidding when I said that this might be the weirdest card of all time. It is definitely something that I did not expect to see in this set, and I definitely did not expect to see this being a legendary creature, as in this reality chip can be your commander. This definitely reminds me of all those old Listed cards, but it works slightly differently, and again, Reconfigure is a brand new mechanic that we are seeing now, and yeah, it just kind of gives a lot of potential to what the future can be for these equipment creature thingies. So overall, I mean, even just without this being attached, having this come down on turn 2 and be able to see the top card of your library can be pretty huge. Knowing what you're going to be seeing coming up can definitely impact your future decisions that you're going to be making, and also on top of that, obviously there are ways, plenty of ways to mess with the top of your library. I mean, even just deciding to crack an Evolving Wilds when you do can, shuffle your library to ensure that you don't get a dead card and you get something else. But again, once you attach this to one of your creatures, then the real value starts to happen. Being able to play lands off the top and cast spells from the top of your library essentially just gives you access to kind of like a separate hand. It's a very different form of card advantage because, again, let's say a land is on top and you play that, well, you didn't exactly draw a card, but now you've got access to the next card, which again could be something that you can play. And then you have access to the next card after that, and so on and so forth. On top of that, a massive upside to this card is that when you attach it to a creature you control, it's not a creature. Sorry, I should have actually worded that probably a little differently. That was a little confusing. When you attach the reality chip to a creature, the reality chip ceases to be a creature. And that is a huge thing because a lot of board wipes out there are creature destroying board wipes, and this would then not be destroyed when one of those goes off. So this can dodge wraths and stay in play so you can attach it to something else when you get another creature out. Regardless, yeah, this is a very unique card and an extremely unique commander, so let's jump into some cards that you might want to consider if you want to build a deck around this commander. So with this essentially Future Sight-esque commander, some cards that I would definitely consider when building around it are cards like Millikin, Codex Shredder, and Zalfirin Void. Millikin might just be a simple 0/1 construct for 2, but it can tap to mill a card and add a colorless. So this mana dork not only can help ramp us, obviously by being able to add colorless, but milling a card can actually be a very good thing. Again, the reality chip, even when it's not attached to a creature, allows us to see the top card of our library, so if we see that it's a dead card that we don't want to draw into, well, we can just mill it with this. And of course, when it is attached to a creature, and we can just attach it to Millikin because it doesn't really matter who we attach it to, we then get access to the top of our library and we can play lands and spells from there, which is absolutely massive. Again, even better than just straight up card advantage at some point. So obviously also we can consider other mill cards like Codex Shredder, which are fantastic in a deck that, knows what the top of its library is. Codex Shredder simply has tap, target player mills a card, and by paying 5 and tapping it, we can sacrifice it to return target card from our graveyard to our hand. Again, being able to get dead cards off the top of our library instead of drawing into them can be huge for a deck like this. And also, when we do have access to the top of our library, being able to get dead cards off the top, again, might just allow us to play another spell from the top or another land from the top. And obviously, if we really need to, we can sacrifice this to get a more important card out of our graveyard back. Even something as simple as Zalfirin Void is a very easy include in this monocolored deck. It has, when it enters the battlefield, scry 1 and it taps for a colorless. So when we know that we've got a dead card on top of our library, we can get this in play and just simply move that card to the bottom. Yeah, there are a lot of cards out there that deal with moving the top card of our library, whether it's into our graveyard or the bottom of our library, etc, etc, etc. And again, in tandem with our commander, they can be huge. Next up, obviously, since we don't have access to green, we don't have access to a ton of ways to get extra lands into play, but we do have access to things like Gearport Orrery, Terrain Generator, and Walking Atlas. Gearport Orrery says each player may play an additional land on each of their turns at the beginning of each player's upkeep. If that player has no cards in hand, that player draws 3 cards. So obviously this kind of effect benefits all players, so you have to be careful with it, and when you choose to actually use this in your deck. But what it can do is allow you to play multiple lands, again, either from your hand or on top of your library. And again, when you've got access to the cards off the top of your library, you can very easily get 2 lands down in a turn. And that can be absolutely huge, again, especially if you've got, say, 2 lands on the top of your library, you play land, then another land, you just ramped, and then also, you probably have access to something else that's not a land on top now, again, percentage chance, whatever, so you can cast that spell then. So this basically not only helps ramp you, but it can also help you essentially get more card advantage and more value off the top of your library. But again, there really aren't too many ways for additional lands to be played in a turn in mono blue, but we do have ways to do it in a different way with things like Terrain Generator and Walking Atlas. Terrain Generator taps for a color, so we can pay 2 and tap it to put a basic land card from our hand onto the battlefield tapped. And then Walking Atlas can essentially tap to do the exact same thing, though we are not limited to it being a basic land, I guess. Regardless, what you're going to be doing is instead of actually playing a land from your hand, you're just going to actually tap one of these to get that land into play. So that doesn't count as your land drop for the turn, and then if you do have a land on top of your library, you can just get it in play from there. So yeah, even though we don't have access to green, we do have some ways to ensure that we can get additional value out of those lands that we're going to have access to on the top of our library. Next up, some other cards you might want to consider are miracles like Temporal Mastery, Devastation Tide, and Vanishment. Knowing what's on top of your library can really help you set up for a miracle, and okay, let's just go through what miracles exactly are. Basically, essentially, if it's the first card that you draw in a turn, you can cast it for its miracle cost. For example, Temporal Mastery costs 5 blue, and it says take an extra turn for this one, exile Temporal Mastery, but it's got a miracle cost of 1 in the blue. So essentially, Time Walk pricing for a 7 mana extra turn spell, yeah, that can be incredibly powerful. And then Devastation Tide says return all non-land permanents to the owner's hands. It usually costs 3 blue, but its miracle cost is also just 1 in a blue. And Vanishment says put target non-land permanent on top of its owner's library, and its miracle cost is blue, though it does cost 4 in a blue if not. So again, a lot of savings on each of these, and being able to know that this is on top of your library can be huge to set yourself up for when you want that miracle. Again, if you've got a draw spell, you can do this on an opponent's turn as well by drawing into this, so yeah, make sure you plan ahead. Also, some other kinds of cards you might want to consider are cards like See the Truth, Sage of the Beyond, and Knowledge Pool. See the Truth says look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of those cards in your hand, the rest in the bottom of your library in a random order. If this spell is cast from anywhere other than your hand, put each of those cards in your hand instead. So basically, again, if we're casting this off the top of our library thanks to our commander, this is 2 mana, get 3 cards. And then Sage of the Beyond is a 5/5 with flying and foretell for 4 and a blue, and it says spells you cast from anywhere other than your hand cost 2 less to cast. So obviously if we're casting spells off the top of our library, this gives us some fantastic mana reduction for those spells. And then next up is a very, well, let's just say obnoxious card in some situations, Knowledge Pool. It's an artifact that has imprint. When it enters the battlefield, each player exiles the top 3 cards of their library. Whenever a player casts a spell from his or her hand, that player exiles it. If the player does, he or she may cast another non-land card exiled with Knowledge Pool without paying that card's mana cost. So essentially you can lock your opponents into just casting certain spells that, got exiled with this, and essentially they can't just cast things regularly from their hand. You, however, have access to the top of your library and cast spells from there, so you can get around this in that way. Again, keep in mind it does say whenever a player casts a spell from their hand. So there's some tricky things that you can do like that if you want to go in that direction. Now when it comes to other commanders that might want to consider their reality chip in the 99 of their decks, the first one that came into my mind was Vega the Watcher. Vega has whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, draw a card. Obviously, the reality chip gives you access to the top of your library and knowing what it is, and then obviously if it's attached to a creature, access to actually casting those spells, and yeah, you can get a lot of card advantage in this kind of a deck by just having access to the top of your library and be able to cast those spells. Next up, another commander that definitely might want to consider the reality chip. How about Yennet Cryptic Sovereign? Yennet is a 3/5 with Flying, Vigilance, and Menace, and whenever Yennet attacks, you reveal the top card of your library. If that card's converted mana cost is odd, you may cast it without paying its mana cost, otherwise draw a card. So obviously, knowing what the top card of your library is can be a huge advantage in a deck built around Yennet. Though obviously the reality chip has an even converted mana cost, it can still really contribute in a deck like this. Next up, how about Ulrin, God of the Cosmos? Ulrin's going to get +1/+1 for each card in your hand and each foretold card you own in exile. At the beginning of your end step, you choose a card type, then really top 2 cards of your library. You put all the chosen cards of that type in your hand, the rest of them on your library in any order. So obviously this can be a guessing game if you don't know exactly what the top card of your library is, but by knowing at least one of those 2 cards, you can at least make the right call and get some sort of card advantage from this commander. And you also might get lucky. Let's say, again, the top card of your library is a land. Cool, say lands, and then maybe the next one's land too, and you get 2 cards now instead of 1. But yeah, by having the reality chip in play, you guarantee at least some card advantage with this commander. And speaking of card advantage, we've got to talk about Rashmi, Eternity's Crafter. Rashmi has, whenever you cast your first spell each turn, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a non-land card with converted mana cost less than that spell's, you may cast without paying its mana cost. If you don't cast a revealed card, put it in your hand. So again, with reality chip, by knowing exactly what's on top of your library, you can determine what spell you should be casting, if you want to either, just draw into that card, or if you want to be able to cast that thing for free by having a bigger spell cast. Knowledge truly is power, and the reality chip can help out with a lot of commanders in that aspect. And the final commander that came to my mind was Galia, Kindler of Hope. Galia has, you may look at the top card of your library anytime, so the reality chip in this actually do the exact same thing in that aspect, but it also has, you may cast or an equipment spells from the top of your library. Whenever you cast an equipment spell this way, it gains when this equipment enters the battlefield attached to target creature you control. So this commander already gives you access to the top of your library, but to specifically aura and equipment spells. That being said, when you do cast an equipment spell, like the reality chip, you can just straight up attach it right away. So you don't have to pay that reconfigure cost at all, and then you get access to the top of your library for any spells. Oh, and also lands as well. So yeah, the reality chip is kind of like an additional value that Galia doesn't have access to on its own. And of course, there are other equipment decks out there that could consider the reality chip as a fantastic piece of equipment in their deck as well. Regardless, now it's time for me to wrap this quick take up and give you my final thoughts on the reality chip. I never thought I would see the type legendary artifact creature equipment jellyfish, but I am happy that we are seeing it now. Reconfigure, I think, is a really cool mechanic that has a lot of potential. And again, the amount of card advantage that the reality chip can actually give you is pretty absurd. Again, basically a future sight on a commander that protects itself from most board wipes out there that are just dealing with creatures. But yeah, there are a ton of other fantastic cards to talk about from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, so make sure you stay tuned to this channel for more exciting spoilers. And with that, the show has come to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one.